Good afternoon. My name is Rita Lerner, and I am the daughter of Holocaust survivors. My mother, Henny Dermashkin Gurko, was a survivor of the Vilna Ghetto and Dachau. My father, Simon Gurko, survived in Siberia. I have been part of this commemoration for more than 30 years and have seen it grow to include the active participation of the third and the fourth generation, and that is how it should be. When you entered the synagogue this morning, my mother and her sister's music played. Like so many of you, I began attending this commemoration with parents and other family members. With each passing year, there are fewer and fewer familiar faces. We honor their memory and the memory of all survivors who have passed away, leaving us to carry on their great legacy. It is vital to know that the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, will always be in the forefront of this important observance. On behalf of the museum and its many partner organizations, we are grateful for you joining us today. Together, we will remember and honor our Kedoshim who perished in the Holocaust. Before our program begins, let me thank all the volunteers here today, as well as the staff of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, especially Rita Josephson, for their efforts in putting this commemoration together. In addition, I would like to thank everyone at Temple Emmanuel for their warm hospitality. Once again, please silence your cell phones if you haven't done so already.
My name is Ann Oster. I'm a daughter and daughter-in-law of Holocaust survivors. We've been gathering together here for many years, and it is a true honor to be with you again and to share this commemoration with you and your families. It is inspiring to see so many people here. This event now enjoys the support of 29 organizations that help us inspire new organizations.
Please rise for the national anthems. Benjamin Sokol will lead us in the Star-Spangled Banner and Hatikva. On the keyboard is Zalman Mlatek, son of Holocaust survivor Joseph Mlatek. Please be seated. Thank you, Benjamin. Please welcome Bruce C. Ratner, Chairman of the Board of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Rita Lerner. And thanks, Annie Oster and Seth Weinstein. Thank you, Zalman. Thank you, Benjamin Sokol. You're very special people, Rita and Ann. You have done this for 30 years, and I'm honored to be on this same pulpit with you. So thank you again so very, very much. It's an honor to be here at Temple Emmanuel and to see all of you devoted to a mission that we all share, to remember and to educate. We are here to honor the survivors, to remember those survivors who are no longer with us, and to remember those who were murdered in the Shoah. I know I speak for all of us this afternoon by mourning the tragedy that occurred yesterday. The last day of Passover, the tragedy occurred at Congregation Chabad in Poway, California. We are one in solidarity and prayer with the victims, their families, and the entire Poway Jewish community. It is 6 months to the day after Pittsburgh. And we watched how a congregant put herself in front of a rabbi to save his life. We watched how children were covered and put in other rooms. The heroism and bravery of our people, and yet the sadness is all apparent from that horrible act. We had all hoped that anti-Semitism and hate directed at our people would have lessened over these years. But we find that now we need to redouble our efforts to educate everyone about the Holocaust and the hate that led to this darkest time of our people's history. Our museum is dedicated to that mission with educating young people as its sacred obligation. Next week, we will be opening an extraordinary exhibition on Auschwitz, not long ago and not far away. The exhibition is extremely important. It is part of our mission to never forget. But it is also, again, to mourn for the victims and understand their tragedy, their lives cut short, their resistance, both spiritual and physical. But it is also to say, Am Yisrael Chai. We are a people of perseverance, and we are a people of hope. And we will also never forget Am Yisrael Chai. It is a privilege to be here this afternoon and to be part of this solemn day and to be part of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. I know I am joined in this message by our very devoted Board of Trustees and our dedicated, hardworking staff and volunteers, colleagues in everything that we do. Thank you, colleagues. And leading the museum is our president and CEO, Jack Klieger. Jack is the child of survivors, and his mother is here today. He has been on our board for over 15 years. He is universally respected, and we are blessed to have him lead us in our museum's efforts. Jack.
Thank you, Bruce, for that wonderful introduction, for those important words about our museum. I want to welcome the people here today at Temple Emmanuel, as well as thousands of live stream viewers around the globe, and thank everyone for being with us. We're all gathered today for the annual Gathering of Remembrance, the largest Holocaust commemoration in the nation. This event has been an annual tradition of ours. For over 30 years, it has shaped our work, our interaction with others, and our institution's dedication to memory and to teaching the lessons of a painful and crucial chapter of our people's history. Let me first recognize co-founders, Rita Lerner and Ann Oster, our elected officials, and dignitaries, our board of trustees, our partner organizations, and the many people who have helped make today happen. Among our many talented and hardworking museum staff, I especially want to thank Rita Josephson and Lindsay Mallon for their work in making the annual gathering a reality. For 30 years, we've come together to do the difficult and important work of remembering, and each year, our communal voice grows stronger. Elie Wiesel said, "Only in remembering what happened to us can the world assure that it will not happen to others." We defy the Nazis' attempts to dehumanize and destroy the Jewish people, and we take an unwavering stand that the forces of intolerance will not rise again. We will not forget, and we will not let others forget. And we will educate and teach future generations, diverse visitors, including nearly 500,000 school children of all backgrounds, who have entered our doors to learn and to remember. On May 8th, the 74th anniversary of VE Day, when the Germans surrendered, the museum will open the largest and most significant exhibition in our history. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away. The New York Times has written 2 front-page stories about this exhibition, saying it is one of the most high-profile attempts to educate and immerse young people, for many of whom the Holocaust is a fading and ill-understood slice of history. This is our collective mission. And at the heart of this mission is the cherishing of the survivors among us today, along with their families. Their presence reminds us that this was truly not long ago, and they remain the driving force of our community. Could every survivor with us today, and please take as long as you need, stand and be recognized. Please, for us. We thank you, we recognize you, and we promise you that your grandchildren's grandchildren, there will always be a place of memorial and education about the 6 million. I thank everyone else for joining us today, for listening, for learning the lessons of history, and for remembering. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Senior Rabbi of Temple Emmanuel, Rabbi Joshua Davidson, to deliver the invocation.
If you are able, would you please rise? Makor Chaim, source of life everlasting, God in whom memory lives, we stand in awe and humility before you. We assemble at this hour in the shadow of yet another synagogue shooting, this time during Passover Yizkor prayers at the Chabad Community Center of Poway, California, 6 months to the date of the attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. Our hearts reach out to the family of Lori Kay, who gave her life standing between Rabbi and shooter, and to the injured, Rabbi Yisrael Goldstein, Almog Peretz, and 8-year-old Noya Dahan, and to their temple community. We grieve beside them. This attack proves once again the enduring menace of the world's longest hatred, and now it has been reanimated in this country by nativist rhetoric and armed by guns. In the names of yesterday's dead and wounded, let us make this pledge. We will emerge from this year of horrific violence against those gathered in prayer as we are now, in San Diego, in Squirrel Hill, in New Zealand, in Sri Lanka, even firmer in our commitment to fighting the surging anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, all the religious and ethnic hatreds that still stain our world. Our own people's history demands it. At this Yom HaShoah gathering, the oldest and largest in New York City, our city, which became a refuge for countless Jewish immigrants and survivors, we ask, O God, that you bless us with the courage we need to carry on that fight. Bless all who in your name labor for righteousness. And in this, its 20th year as New York's Holocaust Memorial Museum, bless those who guide and support our Museum of Jewish Heritage, a treasure to our community we need now more than ever. In remembrance of the 6 million of our people who perished at the hands of the Nazis, in gratitude to the survivors whose heroism inspires us, and in commitment to their children and grandchildren, we will fulfill the divine call to service. Yehiyu l'ratzon imrei fi v'hegyon libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri v'goa li. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts this day be acceptable to you, O God, and may the works of our hands in the days to come bring healing to this world and honor to those whose memories we cherish and will forevermore. Amen. Please be seated.
Today, we will hear from David Burke from our third generation. David's grandfather, Michael Frank, was a survivor of the Holocaust.
My name is David Burke, and I'm proud and honored to be here today. Before I tell you about my grandfather, Michael Frank, I want to thank the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, for all they do to honor survivors of the Holocaust and for giving me the opportunity to share my grandfather's story. My grandfather, who I call Papa, is one of my idols. He passed away 6 years ago yesterday, and there isn't a day that goes by where I don't think of him. It's through his story I will tell you how a pair of boots changed his life. My grandfather grew up in Poland, 90 miles from the German border. Before the Germans invaded Poland, Papa's family owned a fabric business. They owned the building, ran a fabric store on the ground, and lived above it. On weekends, Papa would go with his father to sell fabric at the local markets. It's at the markets where he learned to speak German, a skill that helped him survive. In the summer of 1939, Papa watched the Polish cavalry and armed soldiers as they went to the Polish-German border by horse. On September 1st of that same year, his life would change forever. The Germans invaded on a Friday, and by Sunday, there were food shortages. Although a 14-year-old boy at the time, he remembered his mother would skip dinner so he and his brother wouldn't go hungry. We do not have a clear understanding of how long it took the German army to separate young men from their families and put people into work camps as laborers. Papa and his brother were separated from their parents early on. My grandfather became a welder in a munitions camp. In his first stop, Papa was in a camp with British prisoners of war. The British soldiers were treated differently than the Jewish people who were taken from their homes. Papa knew a small amount of English and asked a British soldier if any of the other soldiers were Jewish. It turned out the captain of the British Army unit was Jewish. My grandfather handed the British soldier a note for the captain. The note said, "I am hungry and in need of shoes." The next day, the soldier returned with a cake and a brand new pair of boots. As soon as my grandfather received the boots, he ran to his welding station and rubbed oil all over the top of the boots so that way they would look old and worn. If the German soldiers would have seen his new boots, they would have confiscated them. As a welder, my grandfather was shipped from factory to factory, city to city. Eventually, the Germans decided to close the munition factories and move all the Jewish prisoners into concentration camps. As the war went on, the conditions in the camps got worse, and the meals became more and more meager. All the prisoners would line up for potato soup. The big barrels of soup would come out of the kitchen. If you were in the front of the line, you got broth, and it was hot. If you were at the back of the line, you might get a cold potato, if you were lucky. If you were too far in the back of the line, the food ran out and you didn't eat. One winter, my grandfather was ordered to march to Auschwitz. The German soldiers gathered up the prisoners to march in a line. The roads were covered in snow. Prisoners who did not have shoes were given a pair of wooden shoes. The wooden shoes expanded in the snow, making it impossible to walk. For those who couldn't stay in line or continue marching, they were shot by German supervising officers. My grandfather kept going due to his pair of boots. When Papa arrived at Auschwitz, at a camp entry point, he was recognized by a doctor from his town. The doctor explained to Papa he had dysentery, and if the Germans found out, he would be killed. Recognizing a familiar face, Papa wanted to stay with the doctor, but the doctor advised him to sneak into the prisoner of war quarters with the captives of the Russian army, something my grandfather did. At this time, America was now involved in the war and defeating the Germans. One night, Papa and a group of Russian soldiers risked their lives to escape Auschwitz. This was his chance at freedom. He was able to escape the camp with the Russians and hide in the forest. Papa could not keep up with the Russian soldiers, and they parted ways. Eventually, Papa fortuitously came across the American army and gained his freedom. When the war ended, Papa stayed in Europe with the American army and eventually immigrated to America. He moved to the Bronx, where he met my grandmother, who is with us here today, and he made a career for himself as a furrier. Papa never met the British captain. The boots the captain gave my grandfather lasted him throughout the entire war. The British captain didn't owe Papa anything, but he saved his life with a split-second decision. It wasn't conscious charity, just being human. Think about it. A man that Papa never met saved his life. The deed came up in a moment of time, and it was done because it was the right thing to do. We will all be faced at some point in our life with an opportunity to help someone, and it's up to us whether we act or not. Remember, you will never know what your small act of kindness will do for someone or how it will impact their life. Being a third-generation survivor is the most important part of my family history. It also comes with responsibility. I'm now the father of two and want to ensure that Papa's story is passed down. My wife and I decided to use our children's names to honor our family history. My son is named after Papa, and my daughter's Hebrew name is Hannah, my great-grandmother's name. My wife and I know eventually each of our children will ask us who they are named after. Explaining why each name was carefully picked will ensure our family history is passed down to the next generation. My children will never hear my grandfather's story directly from Papa, the way I did, but they will hear it because it's our responsibility to educate them about the past and where we came from. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for representing the third generation today and every day. My name is Samantha Lerner Silverman, and I too am a member of the third generation. It has been a privilege to attend the commemoration every year with my family. I am now proud to introduce Irving Roth, a survivor of the Holocaust, to address us today.
It was a balmy evening in May of 1944. I arrived in Auschwitz at age 14. The scene that greeted me was frightening. There were guards screaming, "Heraus! Mach schnell!" and take nothing with you. In the distance, I saw chimneys belching out orange flames and smoke. 4 lines, screamed the guards. Days from 3 days in the cattle car, I proceeded to fall into line. I came face to face the man in uniform who waved me to the left, my brother to the left, my grandfather, my grandmother, my aunt, my 10-year-old cousin, Edith, to the right. 24 hours later, I had no grandfather. I had no grandmother. I had no Aunt Clara, nor my cousin Edith. They were all ashes. Of the 4,000 people that arrived that night in 1944 in Auschwitz, 24 hours later, 300 of us were still alive. The rest were ashes. Why was I in Auschwitz? What crime did I commit? I was born a Jew. That was my crime. I was born in 1929 in a democracy called Czechoslovakia. Lived in a small city of 6,500 people, where Jews and Catholics and Protestants and Russian Orthodox lived together in peace and harmony, relatively speaking. At age 6, I started school, a public school, a totally integrated school. In fact, I will share with you the fact that I happen to be a 6-year-old that liked school. Now you might ask, why? I loved cursive writing? No. My school had a soccer team, and my passion was just that at age 6 and 7 and 10. But I must share with you another piece, and that's the fact there was one other detail why I liked school. First day of school, I walk in and I look around my class. There's about 30 students, and as I scanned it, my eyes stopped, looking at the most gorgeous girl that I've ever seen in my life. I tell you this story because it's important. It's important because this particular girl was Russian Orthodox and I was Jewish Orthodox. But we became friends. We did homework together. That is until 1939. Because in 1939, my friends, my country no longer existed. Democracy was gone. The name was Slovakia, a fascist country, where the largest single party of the country was fascist, Nazi. I knew that at age 10. Why? Because I couldn't go into the park because I was a Jew. I couldn't go to the beach because I was a Jew. I had to deliver my sheepskin jacket to the police department because I was a Jew. Because it was a luxury. And Jews are not allowed to have any luxuries. And slowly, my friends, step by step, more restrictions. No radio, no bicycle. I knew that even though I was only 10 or 11 years old. I was being persecuted, very personally. I told you about my little friend who was Russian Orthodox. By 1940, I'm carrying her books one night and saying to her, "Are you coming over to my house to do homework, or shall I come over to your house?" She says, "No, I don't want to talk to you anymore because the Jews are evil." And my father told me not to speak with you. Ordinary people. By 1940, Jews could no longer have businesses. They were Aryanized. My father, to prevent his lumber business to be taken over, spoke to one of his wonderful Christian friends. Albert was his name. And asked Albert to kindly lend him his name. So he changed the name of the company, transferred the business to a Christian, and therefore it'll be safe. And this friend, a rescuer. 3 months go by, and one day he tells my father, since his name appears on the marquee, profits are his. My father can remain as a manager, but remember, Joe, the business is mine. By 1942, my dear friends, the fate of the Jews was sealed by a conference in Wannsee. They were going to build death camps, bring the Jews of Europe there, and convert them to ashes. And so we were in danger, and we managed to escape Slovakia to Hungary, which decided for the moment at least not to ship its Jews. But that too changed. By spring of 1944, 437,000 Jews from all over Hungary in 53 days were in cattle cars to Auschwitz. And that's, my friends, where I was at age 14. How is it possible that 250 members of the Gestapo under Eichmann got full cooperation of every single Hungarian policeman to put the Jews into cattle cars? How is it possible that ordinary, law-abiding, seemingly moral people, by the tens of thousands, participated in the active murder of Jews? Because it was not Adolf Hitler alone. It's the participation of hundreds of thousands of people that was necessary to create death camps, to create gas chambers, to create crematoria, build them, design them by ordinary people. Why is it, my friends, that by 1944, spring and summer, the skies over Europe were free for bombing by the Allied air forces? But they didn't bomb the bridges, the tunnels, the rails to Auschwitz. Why was it? Because the Jews were abandoned, my friends, not only by their friends, their neighbors, their country, by the whole world, by the democracies. Abandoned. That's why I was in Auschwitz. Separated from my family, I was tattooed and assigned to work with horses, plow the fields, drain the swamps of Auschwitz. From early morning to late at night, working hard at age 14, on a diet of a black liquid, referred sometimes as coffee, but I'm afraid to say that because Starbucks would be very upset. Some soup at noon, piece of bread at night. But some evenings, my friends, we would come back from work, back-breaking labor, and rather than being allowed to go into our building, we would be then escorted by the guards directly to take a shower, where you had to get undressed, of course, take a piece of soap, and you would march into the shower, which itself was wonderful. A hot shower after all day working. But my friends, before you got to the shower, there'd be a doctor in uniform, look at you for an instant of time, and determine if you should continue to live or feed the fires of Auschwitz. I survived that. My brother survived that. By January of 1945, my friends, the whole complexion of the war has changed. The Russian army was 50 miles away. Liberation, maybe, but no, a death march. 3 days and 3 nights, marching in the cold, in wooden clogs, not 6 layers of clothing, but hardly a threadbare jacket. After 3 days, we were placed into open cars to Buchenwald, a place which was built for 5,000 people, but now there were over 50,000, and as such, the rations were not like in Auschwitz at all. A boiled potato every second or third day. People died. My brother was taken away. Alone, starving, 75 pounds. I hope for liberation because it is now April of 1945 and the death marches begin again, and I keep hiding day after day, hoping the army of the US will arrive. Luckily, I was able to hide long enough to be liberated on the 11th of April of 1945. 15 years old in the middle of Germany alone. But Providence was good to me. I went back to Czechoslovakia, and there I found my parents. They were saved by a righteous Christian family in Budapest. I was home, but not welcome, my friends. How many Jews survived? Said my neighbors. Germany and Hitler did not do a perfect job. Look at them, they're coming back. They even want their property back. How dare they? They should be gone. And so, my friends, we had to leave. But my friends, even with the destruction of the seeming destruction of Nazism, with the establishment of the Jewish state in 1948, with all that, my friends, anti-Semitism has not disappeared. It has new names. Anti-Zionism, anti-Israel, hatred of the Jewish people has not disappeared. Today, when the Jewish people defend themselves, it's called aggression. How dare they? We have been able to persecute the Jews for 2,000 years. Now, they're fighting back. How dare they? Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. No question about it. Yet, it's being accused of being an apartheid state. I tell people when they say that in the conferences that I speak at, I say, tell me, have you ever seen a sign in a hospital in Israel which says, for Jews only, for Christians only, for Hindus only? Have you ever seen a separation in the bus? No. Equal rights to all. This is what's going on, yet same form of lies, fabrications. Unfortunately, these accusations pass as facts to so many. Millions of people in the Middle East and other places believe all those lies. The great number of Europeans are in there with them. And I must say, my friends, that I meet many of these in the American college campus. And yes, the saddest of all, some of these accusations are taking place in the Congress of the United States. So, my friends, the demonization of the Jew continues. But in memory of the Kedoshim, the holy ones who were murdered and martyred in Auschwitz and Treblinka, Majdanek, Chemno and Belzec, Sobibor, and those million or so that were murdered in the fields of the Soviet Union and many other places. We must remember them and ensure that those who are planning the destruction of the Jewish people today will fail. And so, my friends, today on Yom HaShoah, I call upon all freedom-loving people in the world to fight against anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, anti-Israel, not just today on Yom HaShoah, but every day. We must fight this in every way we can, through education and action. It's not enough that we remember. Remember we must, but it's not enough. We must act upon the lessons that we have learned from the Shoah. We must stand up to anti-Semitism of the world at every turn in the whole world with no apology. For those we remember today, for our children and grandchildren, for the Jewish people, and my friends, for all of humanity, and for the existence of Am Yisrael. Chizku ve'imtzu. Let us be strong and courageous. Thank you.
Thank you, Irving. Thank you again, Irving. It is an honor to have you with us today. The Temple Emmanuel Choir will sing Ani Mamim as 36 women survivors of the Holocaust light memorial candles. They are accompanied by 36 young people, many of whom are children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors and active members of the many young Jewish leadership groups volunteering and participating today.
Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to recognize our significant and continuing partnership with the United States Senator Charles E. Schumer and Consul General of Israel in New York, Dani Dayan. We are so pleased to welcome them and a number of dignitaries here today, including the Consul General of Germany in New York, David Gill, Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, Council Member Robert Cornegie, and Council Member Mark Levine. On behalf of the museum, thank you for joining us today. I am now proud to introduce, representing the state of New York, the Honorable Charles E. Schumer.
Thank you, and thank you all so much for being here. As you know, I come every year to this commemoration because it is so important. This year may be even more important than any in a very long time because of all that's going on in the world today. And it has a little added gravity for me. I attend every year, but this is the first time I'm speaking to you as a grandfather. Last November, my oldest daughter gave birth to her son, Noah Melvin Schumer Shapiro. And like all grandparents, my wife and I dote on our grandson every day. But the birth of Noah has caused me to wonder, what kind of world will we leave to Noah and his generation, and the generation after that? Since World War II, anti-Semitism in America has been on the decline. But is that vicious and awful disease now, for the first time in a long while, is it on the rise again? The Museum of Jewish Heritage, and let me thank the museum and all the people who work and make the museum the great institution that it is. You are directly engaged in answering that question every single day. You've given a powerful voice to the victims of the Holocaust who cannot speak for themselves, but whose memory calls down to us through decades for justice. Since the museum was founded, more than 2 million visitors have been confronted by that voice for justice. We have a moral responsibility, that's why we're here, to make sure the Holocaust's terrible stain on humanity never fades from memory, because we must still reckon with what happened, but also because genocide that's not properly told can lead to another. We know how the last genocide began, with isolated incidents that spread and spread and spread, and were never forcefully rebutted. In the last decade, there has been a resurgence of anti-Semitism in Europe, where it seems to live and grow deep in its soil. But now, in the past few years, there's been a resurgence in America as well. Between 2016 and 17, the U.S. saw the largest single increase in the harassment, vandalism, and assault of Jews and Jewish institutions. Like all of you, I feel the same fear, the same dread, the same alarm that past generations of Jews have felt when anti-Semitism rears its ugly head and begins inevitably to walk hand in hand with violence against Jews. Just yesterday, as you all know, a gunman entered a synagogue in California, yelling anti-Semitic slurs and opening fire on the congregants. His heinous attack left a 60-year-old woman dead, the rabbi wounded, a man and a girl with shrapnel wounds. 6 months earlier, to the day, we watched in horror as the single greatest massacre of Jews on American soil was perpetrated by an anti-Semitic, white supremacist terrorist in Pittsburgh. My friends, these are the stakes. These are the stakes. That is why That is why every time we see or hear anti-Semitism, we have a solemn obligation not to hold our tongues or parse our language, but to call it out with courage and clarity. Plain and simple, we must denounce anti-Semitism no matter who it comes from and no matter how painful the price. It will always be wrong to use anti-Semitism as a political weapon, always. And let me tell you, if you only care about anti-Semitism coming from your political opponents, then you are not fully committed to fighting anti-Semitism. This matters a great deal. The fact that today we must once again face down the ancient poison of anti-Semitism is a reminder of how vigilant we must remain. We must remain vigilant. We will remain vigilant. It is in our bones. It is who we are. But we should also be vigilant against any form of bigotry. The thing about bigots, ladies and gentlemen, is that they're not selective in who they hate. Anybody who doesn't look like them, who doesn't believe in the things they believe. That is why we have seen so many different houses of worship attacked profanely in recent weeks. With just 1 week ago on Easter Sunday, hundreds of Christian Sri Lankans were massacred in their churches. And what happened at the synagogue yesterday in California is rooted in the same white supremacist hatred and bile that drove attacks against the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, mosques in New Zealand, and the Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston. That is why we must recommit ourselves to fighting anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry. As we depart from this holy temple today, we should repeat, we all know the words, but we should repeat them, of Martin Niemöller, the Lutheran pastor in Germany during the Third Reich. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, for I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. My friends, it shouldn't be restated, need to be restated, but we live during a time when we remind ourselves who and what we are over and over again, day after day. We are American Jews, and as American Jews, we're united by a common story, like Moses and the Israelites escaping Egypt. We were all once strangers in a strange land. This country, the great American country, welcomed us, allowed us to thrive. My parents have been able to build a good life as proud Americans and proud Jews here. They worked hard, raised a family, instilled both American and Jewish values in their children. 2 weeks ago, they were able to celebrate their 70th anniversary. My father, Baruch Hashem, is 95, and my mother, Baruch Hashem, is 90. And because of the tolerance and openness and opportunity that courses through all of American life, their son now stands before you as a party leader in the United States Senate and the highest elected office a Jew has ever attained in the history of this country. But many of my parents' uncles and cousins stayed in Europe and were not as lucky as my parents. As a boy, I grew up hearing stories of my great-grandmother. In 1941, when the Nazis invaded Ukraine, then part of Galicia, they asked my great-grandmother to gather her children and her grandchildren on the porch. Over 30 people gathered from ages 85 to 4 months. They said, the Nazis did, "You are coming with us." She said, "We will not leave." And they machine gunned down every last one of them. Yesterday's shooting in California is a painful reminder of our place in this America or any other country is not completely secure. As great as this country is, and as wonderful it has been to this son of an exterminator and housewife. But it is also what happened yesterday, as so much of our history is written. Out of the Holocaust came the state of Israel. Out of enslavement in Egypt came freedom in the Ten Commandments. Yesterday is another metaphor like that in our history. The woman who was killed at the synagogue, her name was Lori Kay, was shot because she stood between the gunman, the evil gunman, and the rabbi. She gave her life, protecting his. May her memory be a blessing. Let Lori's heroism be an inspiring example for all of us as we struggle to confront the immense challenges facing us. All it takes is one courageous person standing up to stop hate from spreading as Lori did. Every single one of us in this room can be that courageous person, but only if we meet the moment with clarity and conviction. Today we remember how so many have tried to annihilate the Jewish people and our spirit. All have failed. Pharaoh is gone. Hitler is gone. But the Jewish people live on. In Eretz Yisrael and America, Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. I am proud to introduce Ambassador Dani Dayan to offer remarks.
Thank you. In one of the most famous testimonies in the trial of Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem in 1963, Ben Zion Dinur, an Auschwitz survivor that became an Israeli author, better known by his pen name Katzetnik, coined the term that the Holocaust in Europe was in a different planet, in another planet than the planet in which we live. He continued to testify, and a few minutes later, he fainted. Later, he was interviewed and asked, "Why did you faint? Is it because you were overwhelmed by the memories?" And he said, "No, not because of that. I can't stand the memories." He said, "I looked at Adolf Eichmann's eyes, and suddenly, in that split second, I understood that the Holocaust, that diabolic machine of extermination, was done by human beings, by persons, not by Satan." And then I fainted. Incidentally, the person that asked Katzetnik that question was Mike Wallace in 60 Minutes. And I'm saying that because, unfortunately, his son Chris today interviews the Foreign Affairs Minister of a genocidal regime in what I see as a subtle normalization of anti-Semitism. But I mentioned Katzetnik and his different planet because Mr. Roth, the Jewish hero that we just listened to, asked a very poignant question. How could it be that not only our enemies killed us, but also our friends and the democracies of the world were indifferent? And my answer is that though the Holocaust, the Shoah, was indeed a different planet, it was also, unfortunately, the culmination of a centuries-long process, of a century-long process of hatred of the Jew, demonization of the Jew, and dehumanization of the Jew. A process that probably no one could have believed that it will lead to what it eventually led, but a process nevertheless. A process in which Jews were murdered, massacred in pogroms all over Europe for centuries. Sometimes 11 casualties, 11 dead Jews, like in Pittsburgh. Sometimes only 1 and 3 injured, like in Poway. And sometimes, unfortunately, many more. The Holocaust was preceded by a process in which Jews were accused of disloyalty to their countries, leading to the process of the libel blood and the process against Captain Alfred Dreyfus in France. The Holocaust was preceded by many manifestations of anti-Semitism, by cartoons in which Jews were pictured as animals, by cartoons in which Jews were portrayed as leading a blind world. Nothing of those things caused by itself the Holocaust, but the centuries-long, millennia-long process of dehumanization and vilification and stereotypization of the Jews made it possible both the making of the extermination machine and the silence of the world. In this very country, the cradle of modern democracy, when a bill was tabled in Congress to allow the entry of 2,000 Jewish children from Europe, a relative of the then president said 20,000 beautiful Jewish children will become 20,000 ugly Jewish adults. And the bill was not made into law. We were sure, because we are optimists, the Jewish people could not have lived without optimism. We were sure that after the terrible experience of the Holocaust, the world has learned a lesson. And anti-Semitism will be eradicated from the face of the earth. Unfortunately, we were proved wrong. I'm not implying by no way that we are in Germany of the 30s. No, thank God we are very far from there, not only geographically. But unfortunately, many of the signs, many of the atrocities that preceded the Holocaust by decades, by centuries, and even by millennia, we are seeing them again in Europe, in Latin America, and unfortunately also in the United States of America. And the difference between us and our brethren in Europe in the 30s is that we have the experience that they lacked. We have the experience to know that this incredibly can happen. Therefore, more experienced than them, we have the obligation to stand up and combat all forms of anti-Semitism now with force, with all our hearts and souls. My friends, the State of Israel, state that was established barely 3 years after the liberation of Auschwitz, not because of Auschwitz, but in spite of Auschwitz. It was established because of the millennia-long yearning of the Jewish people to return to Zion. The Jewish state obviously doesn't have authority to act beyond its boundaries with law enforcement, with education, with all that is needed to eradicate anti-Semitism. But the fact that we don't have authority doesn't mean we don't have responsibility. It is our responsibility to combat anti-Semitism in all places in which it shows its ugly head, and we will stand by our responsibility. But that being said, it should not be only Israel's responsibility. If no one sees himself responsible, we will do what is needed. But Israel and the Jewish people in all places in which we reside should demand from all the governments of the world, from all the governments in the places that we reside, to be aware that the beast of anti-Semitism is rising its ugly head again, and their attitude towards anti-Semitism 50 and 60 years ago is totally unacceptable. We should do it now and to use all the means that we have in order to do that. As I said, there is a huge difference between these days and those days, and this is the existence of an independent, sovereign Jewish state in Eretz Israel. Medinat Israel, the state of Israel, will stand by its responsibility to be not only a shelter, not only a refuge, but a state that among the families of nations stands by the security, by the dignity, by the life of the entire Jewish people. Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you, Ambassador Dayan, for joining us today. I would now like to invite Cantor Joseph Malavani from the Fifth Avenue Synagogue to sing Unter die Polische Grünige Bämele, accompanied by Zalman Mlotek. The translation can be found on page 5 of your program.
Unter die polische grünige Bäumelach spielen sich mehr nicht keine Moischalach, Schleumalach. Spielen sich mehr nicht keine Sorelach, Nicht auf kein Gesalach, nicht auf kein Schneealach. scheune mer nit die Stimalach fune die kune dei simalach motalach shimalach mit die zerkrelte zerdrapete zoralach fune me beweisen fune derim und geboralach. Streuer nazient die bäuliche Bäumalach, teut seinen jüdische Heimen und Heimalach, teut seinen Gesach, chorebe die Heisalach, wo es verstecken sich Kinder wie Meiselach, jüdische Kinder mit große Augenlach, schwarze Asoi wie mit Heuschech verzeugene, Eigeler Fulle mit Pachat verworfene, unter dem Umgenick dem Bräune getroffene. Unter die peulische Grininke Bäumalach spielen sich mehr nicht kein Meuschalach, Schleumalach. Spielen sich mehr nicht keine Sorelach, Leialach, nicht auf kein Gräsalach, nicht auf kein
That always reminds me of my in-laws' two children, Yochevet and Avrum, 3.5 years old and 1.5 years old, that were taken away in the Lodz ghetto and killed in Chemlo. So thank you very much.
We will now hear Eli Eli by Miriam Kazo, granddaughter of Celia and Jacob Kazo, survivors of the Holocaust, accompanied by Zalman Mlotek on the keyboard. Eli Eli is based on the beautiful poem by Israeli national hero Hannah Senesh.
שלא ייגמר לעולם. these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of man, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of man. Eli, 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 Eli.
Thank you, Miriam. That was beautiful. The Hazamir International Jewish Teen Choir, directed and founded by Matthew Lazar, will now sing Yugen Hymn, followed by Won't Be Silent, a song written by my uncle, Wolf Termashkin. While held at the Vilna Ghetto, Wolf Termashkin founded the Ghetto Orchestra, as well as a music school and a 100-voice choir. He was later transferred into forced labor at the Kluge concentration camp, and it was there where he wrote Won't Be Silent, originally titled Lomer Schweigen, Stay Silent, as a necessary mantra for survival and resistance. Tragically, he was killed just hours before the liberation of the camp. His music was lost for decades until its rediscovery last year by Amnon Weinstein in Israel. We are honored that the Hazamir Choir will sing this song today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our memorial candlelighters are a testament to the strength and dignity that define the medal of Holocaust survivors. Each of these survivors has created a life of meaning. Along with their families, they will light 6 candles in memory of those who perished and will be accompanied by the Temple Emmanuel Choir singing Esprent, a poem by Mordechai Geberting that became the anthem of the underground resistance. Susan Charney is from Budapest, Hungary, and arrived in the United States in 1949. Eugene Genter is from Krakow, Poland, and arrived in the United States in 1950. Sima Katz is from Cheval, Lithuania, and arrived in the United States in 1951. Rena Noodle is from Lvov, Poland, and arrived in the United States in 1957. Maria Roden is from Częstochowa, Poland, and arrived in the United States in 1949. Mark Schoenwetter is from Brostek, Poland, and arrived in the United States in 1961. Please stand. Cantor Joseph Malavani will chant the El Malei Rachamim. We ask that you remain standing for Kaddish B'tzibur, which will be led by Harry Whitland.
Shochein b'meromim amtzei menulcha nechlena al kanifei hashechina b'malos kedoshim utehorim kezor arakiya mazirim lenishmos Shisha milyonei acheinu v'yachyoseinu anashim nashim v'atav sheneregu v'shenishchato v'shenechnako v'shenisrefu Hashem b'machanos ha'hashmada Auschwitz, Birkenau, Treblinka, Majdanek, Belzec, Sobibor, Mauthausen, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Ghetto Warschau, Ghetto Vilna, ומקומות אחרים באירופה בידי הצוררים הגרמנים הנאצים ויוצריהם יימח שמם וזכרם. שכל עם ישראל מתפללים נשמותיהם בגן עדן, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. לכן בעל הוא רחמים, יסתירם בסייסר כנפיו ליומיים ויצרור בצרור החיים נשמותיהם אדוני נחלתם ויקומו לקץ הימים לך יסום Amen.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. יום דברו כרצי ויעלך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומייכון ובחי לכל בית ישראל, והכל ובזמן קרבים רומי. יש מי רב ומבורך לעולם אל עולמי עולמיו. יזברך וישתבח ויסבר וישרומם ויסנשא ויסעדה ויתעלה ויתעלל שמי דקודשו בריחו. אלא מכל ברכתה ושירתו הטוב ברכתה ונחמתה תמירם ביום ובימרו. אמן.
יהי שלמה רבה משמיא.
יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיא וחיים עלינו והכל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו. הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Please be seated. It is traditional at this point during the commemoration for us to pause for a moment of silence. We send a message with our silence that we shall never forget the lives lost during the Holocaust, nor will we forget the stories that we have learned from those who have survived. We pledge to make our world a safer and more peaceful one. Please rise for a moment of silence and remain standing to join the cantor and the Hazamir International Jewish Teen Choir singing the Partisan Song.
vergelten uns im Haar. Und der Nächte wird verschwinden mit dem Wein. Na, lange die Sonne in dem Kajor, wie Apollon so geht das Lied von dort zu dort. Na, Fasane mit die Sonne in dem Kajor, wie Apollon das Lied von dort zu dort. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Es ist nicht kein Lied von einer Feugeläufle frei. Das hat der Volk zu wischen und dicke Welt. Das wird gesungen mit einer Gannes in die Hand. Das hat der Volk zu wischen und dicke Welt. Das wird gesungen mit einer Gannes in der Hand. Sag nicht immer, lass du gehst den besten Weg. Also unbedingt.
This marks the end of the commemoration. On behalf of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, thank you for joining with us. Baruch Hashem, you should be with us next year.